Welcome to Millennium Counseling Center's podcast, where each week we go in depth into all things mental health, addiction recovery, and being our healthiest and happiest self. Enjoy. Okay, so Derek, I was thinking a lot about kind of the origins of 3A and how it started. And one of the questions that I was thinking about is before we really got this off the ground, you had this idea in your head around a different way to help people coming out of treatment. And I'm just separate from an IOP, separate from 3A. What were you kind of beginning to think about in terms of what people needed for different kind of help?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I saw was that there was the aftercare. Once somebody has gone through kind of a comprehensive treatment center, what to do next has always been a challenge in our field. And I think that there's been many different ways to do that and attempts at doing that. But I think that in talking to people who had gone through, different ways. There's a couple things. I think people need support, people need connection, and I think that people need help with planning kind of how they're going to live their life back in the real world once they've been in treatment. So I think that those were the things that the feedback that I had gotten and the understanding that I had is that people didn't feel like they had a very specific plan for themselves, and meaning that there was a plan of what people should do, but each person kind of reacts to things differently, has their own things that are valuable to them. And I think that for the majority of people, there was a pathway that worked pretty well. I think that there's some other folks who needed some more specific guidance and understanding of their recovery journey and needed help with that.
Yeah. I think on my end, what I noticed was that there's to get somebody into treatment, residential treatment, just took a lot of energy. Like family had to get on board, the client had to kind of be ready. Sometimes there's an intervention, sometimes the therapist was involved. And, I just felt like the coming out of treatment and getting ready for applying all of the new strategies and being in recovery, it was a lot. It was a lot, and a lot of people were coming out and struggling with kind of what to do when. And, I felt like when you kind of started talking about increasing the amount of attention and focus on those individual clients, I kind of knew that we were kind of definitely onto something new and something that was going to be pretty helpful.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that the challenge is for people is I think they go to these really good treatment centers, do a ton of work, make a lot of progress. And most of the people who come out of treatment have probably 90 to 95% of what they need to kind of have a successful recovery journey. I think that the challenge is that when it comes to recovery, right? The way you're going to make the most progress is by continuing to stay on that journey and not having any setbacks or increased, crisis situations where the focus then goes back onto that and the focus starts to move away from your progress and now it's just kind of handling the crisis issue. And I think that for the most part people come out and they have most of what they need. I think that the key is that for a lot of folks is they were, like I said, they were missing 5 or 10% of what they needed. And I think that that's one of the things that this program addresses really well is I think we are able to kind of identify what that 5 to 10% is and kind of work through that prior to having a crisis situation so we can keep the focus on their recovery and moving forward.
Yeah. So before we put anything down on paper, what were you envisioning? What did you see as something we could do to change the trajectory of someone's recovery, someone's life, whether it's a program or a strategy? Like, what were you envisioning when we were starting off?
I think it was that people need to feel like they're not alone. You hear a lot in recovery about people talking about connection, and that's accurate. I think that the challenge sometimes is the idea is to go into an environment where you don't know anybody and make quick connections with people and find those folks who you're going to have that connection with, whether it's in 12-step or support groups or IOP or whatever that is, making those connections and finding like you have someone who has your back. I think the additional part about that was it's not just somebody who has your back, it's somebody who has your back and also understands what recovery looks like, the things that you need to do, and is able to help you through challenging situations. Somebody who's been trained to do that, somebody who's gone through it themselves, and to really just have a connection. And that's the part where I feel like a lot of people struggle is that they often feel very alone. And, one of the main goals is to make sure that people don't feel alone and feel like they have a connection to somebody that they can reach out to, that they can talk through difficult situations prior to kind of going back to their default actions, which oftentimes include, kind of the unhealthy behaviors that they were doing before they went to treatment.
Yeah. And I think one of the unique things about being a therapist is that the relationship with the client becomes very close. They're opening up, they're really trusting of that person, they're really vulnerable, and maybe more so than the other kind of ancillary support services, whether it's a group or a case manager or a coach. That the therapist, traditionally has been a role where that relationship has a bond because of the nature of the work. And I think when we started offering more support, I think it made those people that were going through the program in the beginning like, this is a person that I feel close to and trust. And oh, they're going to help me outside of the therapy session. That's a big value to me because whether it's a crisis at work or in a relationship or a trigger that could compromise the recovery, now I can have my person there with me to kind of help me through that. Different than all the other people that could be in that role. I think there's something unique about having your therapist there outside of the direct clinical hours for help.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that one of the core components of the program is attention, right? It's attention, accountability, and acceptance are really what the three A's are about. And I think that a side note of that is that throughout the years, the way that Millennium has progressed the way that we have is that it's always been really important for everyone on our staff to have a really fantastic ability to connect with people. And I think that that's, people who understand the world and human beings understand that not everybody is at that same level from the ability to connect to other people. And so I think that the challenge for us, which I believe we've achieved, is, kind of when we have our entire staff are people that not only are clinically very good and therapeutically understand the things they need to, but they're people who really have a unique ability to connect to folks and build that relationship that you're talking about and that kind of, that ability to feel close to those people. And I think that when someone gets in trouble, when somebody is kind of, going down a path that's negative and that may feel like prior to recovery, I think that everybody knows that the important thing is that you reach out to somebody. But that's really, really difficult to do. It's really difficult to pick up the phone or kind of reach out to somebody when you're feeling like you're kind of going in the wrong direction. And so I think it's really important that what we do for when people come out of treatment is we help make that easier and we help make that a little more comfortable. And I think that one of the ways that we do that is by having, we have contact with the folks who are going through our program two, three, four times a day. And so what that does is that makes that contact a little more familiar for them. And so if there is some shift and there is something that changes, then it's not nearly as hard to reach out and kind of talk about that. And what we know is that the high majority of the time, that if somebody is internally going in the wrong direction, if they talk to somebody who they associate with their recovery, the likelihood that they're going to continue down that path is very low. If they don't connect to someone that they associate with their recovery, then it's extremely difficult to pull out of that by yourself, particularly in early recovery.
Yeah. Well, and I think one of the things that we talked about early on was, some of the statistics around relapse and people kind of not continuing in recovery right after residential treatment, and when we were talking about that, it was like, well, what's missing? What do people need that our industry maybe isn't offering or people aren't taking advantage of? And I think that really shaped the different parts of what we try to emphasize in the program.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think one of the things that I'm really proud of that I think we have achieved at a really high level with this program is that not 100% of the people are sober the entire time, right? People go through challenges. And what we know, there's a lot of different statistics around what percentage of people are able to stay sober and not, but the numbers aren't great. And I think everybody in our world understands that. But I think one of the things I'm really proud of is that when I'm talking to folks that are going through our program, the main thing they understand is for them to live the life that they want to, they need to be in recovery. So whether that pathway there is kind of perfect as far as their behaviors, that varies from person to person. But I think that at the very least, people understand that this is inevitable, that this is how they're going to have to live their life if they want to really kind of get to where they want to get to in life, whether it's relationships or career or health or any of those things. And I think that just the understanding of that goal remains the same kind of leads people to continue to work at this. And that's what we know. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of dedication, and it's a difficult journey. But I think that what we try to do is make that a little bit easier. I think we try to remove barriers for people when we know there's a lot of barriers there, and we look at what those barriers are, what keeps people stuck, and how can we help them to, kind of make this. It's never going to be easy, but we want to help them make it not quite as difficult as it can be.
Yeah. Well, and I think one of the things you're talking about is kind of outcome versus process. I think that one of the things that our program kind of showed me over time is that it's really beneficial both from an outcome and process perspective. A lot of people do remain abstinent during the program and after the program. And I think part of that is because of what they get by going through the program. But there's also kind of this idea that some people that are trying to work in a new direction and get sober, something happens. And then what do you do next is a really important thing for them. And what we found is, by being in our program, that they just show up the next day and we work through it. We use it to try and get better and try to help them kind of figure out kind of what was missing. And so I think one of the things that I really appreciate about the program is that it does have really positive outcomes, but it also was highly focused on the process because once they're done with the program, we want them to feel confident in their recovery and what they do, when they're not seeing somebody on a everyday basis or every other day basis.
Yeah, and you talk about process, which is an important piece of it. And I think that there's a couple things. One is there is a pathway to being healthy that exists. And we know that. And we know that if you kind of continue the different processes we discussed, then you're going to get there. I think that one of the things that I tell people early on when I'm working with them that the most difficult part of their part of coming back home is that what I'm asking them to do is two things. I'm asking them to trust me that what I'm telling them is true and that's accurate. And then I'm asking them to have faith that if they can give themselves the time and continue to go down this path, then they will have really a good understanding of the process, but also will have really good outcomes. And I'm very confident in saying that to people because what I know is that if they do that, then they will have the outcomes that they're looking for. And then they will gain what, I kind of call personal historical data, meaning that instead of them just having to trust that we are telling them that this is going to happen and this is how you're going to feel and this is what this will look like, is it's starting, these things are coming true in their own life. And as they move along that process, then these things are being verified and they're saying, okay, well, I did that. I reached out when I was in trouble and I didn't end up using or acting out. And, they start to see these things that we are saying along the process, like, here's how you handle this, here's what you need to do. And then there's proof in their own journey that then, kind of verifies that and solidifies that, which then allows us to continue down that path and do, kind of deeper work and the continuation of that.
Yeah. What do you kind of now that we're 13, 14 years into this program, what do you see as the arc? What do you think has changed? And where do you see this needing to go in terms of modifications? Or do you feel like just the kind of the core tenets of where we started kind of are kind of still there and really kind of what we're going to kind of continue to do?
I think that anyone who goes through our program has a different experience. Everybody has kind of their own experience because they have these specific things. And I think that's one of the values of it, is that it is truly an individualized and customized program for each person. Each person has a completely separate treatment plan. And those treatment plans from person to person may look very different. And that's based on their journey, the work that they've done, their personality. And so I think that what we have learned to do really well is to be able to do what we set out to do, which was to create kind of a unique experience for each person based on that person. And that's where the, kind of high level of individualized attention allows us to do that, where as we're going down the path, we can adjust and we can rotate a little bit. And I think that the key to this program is continuing to just have great people in our group, because I think that's a very high level skill set to be able to adjust based on kind of what the client needs and what type of work they need to do. And not everybody can do that, but I'm very, very proud of the group that we have here, and how, skilled and personable they are. And I think that we have to have that to do what we want to do with this program, because if we don't have that and we just have a process that people have to follow no matter what's going on in their lives, then I think that's where you lose some of the value.
Yeah. And time again, with all the clients that I've worked with through this program, the feedback that I get back is this was really tailored to me and what I'm going through, whether it's a different kind of addiction or mental health, or catered towards a certain crisis that was going on in their life, or whatever it was. And that was kind of very intentional. And I think it's great to hear time and time again that all those people felt like this was really for them, because that's really kind of why we put this all together, is that for some people you have to really customize and personalize the experience to help them be successful.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to what we talked about previously, is that particularly when somebody has gone to an excellent treatment center, which is, we're fortunate in that most of the treatment centers, in fact, all the treatment centers that we work with are really high level and highly skilled treatment centers, is that they have done the majority of the work from a standpoint of learning and understanding and kind of knowing what they need to do to kind of have the journey they're looking for. I think that the key is that when you say that, Oren, about people's experience, I think the key is what they realize is that we really truly focus on that 5 or 10% that may not be solid yet. And so the time feels very concentrated and very focused on things that are impactful. And I think that certainly we verify whether some of these areas are solid in their life. But if somebody already has the understanding of some of the core concepts of what you need to do in recovery, then we don't need to spend a lot of time kind of trying to teach them that, because they already understand that. So I think what we do really well is identifying what those areas where there needs to be more work and helping people work through those things. And I think doing so prior to having some, crisis event in their life, which then changes the focus of the work that they're doing and allows them to kind of continue along on doing the higher level and deeper work.
Yeah. Well, and I think that can only be done, or at least from my perspective, that can only be done in a one-on-one way, right? That, if somebody really needs to work on X, Y, or Z, and you're in a room with other people for in a group setting, it's not always going to kind of coincide with the different things that are important for you in your recovery. So to get that extra support on top of the group work that people are already doing really helps them kind of hone in on the specific areas that are going to make them successful.
Yeah, and if you look at kind of what are considered the top programs in the country, they have a combination of group and individual work. And so we know that each of those things, both group and individual attention, provide different things. And I think that in certain cases, the group environment is advantageous to folks. But I think that many times, by the time people have gone to treatment and come home, they have gotten the core of what they can get out of group work. And so they now are to the point where they need more specific and customized care. And that's what we try to provide.